Hello, I will be talking to you about the Second World War in Poland. It started on September 1st, 1939, and ended on May 8th, 1945. Poland, Polish government, Polish people were very much afraid of the war, but Polish government was very much aware that war is going to happen, war with Germany. Why? Germany was very unhappy with the outcome of the First World War, which, as you remember, ended in 1918. And after the First World War, Poland was recreated. Germany lost some land, so Poland was recreated. This land was previously Polish, but already a few generations of Germans lived there. There was this loss of territories. There was also heavy reparations, which Germany had to pay after the First World War. There was also economic crisis of the late 1920s at the beginning of the 1930s, which brought Hitler into power. And Germany also developed this ideology of German superiority of the Aryan race. And according to this ideology, Aryans are the ones who are superior humans, and people like Slavic people, including Polish people, are inferior people to that Aryan race. Of course, Jews also are inferior people. So all of these subhumans, they really don't deserve the life Germans deserve. So therefore, Germany needs to expand, needs new territories, and where these territories are in the east. War was in the air, so Poland tried to feel a little safer, entered these treaties, which you have in the slide, in 1939, treaties with Great Britain and France. These were treaties of mutual military assistance, which meant that if any of these three countries was attacked, the other two were supposed to help the invaded countries. According to this treaty, invaded, attacked country was supposed to defend itself for about 2 weeks, and this 2 weeks would have been enough for the other countries to step in. These two countries, when Poland was attacked on September 1st, 1939, they shortly after declared war against Germany. However, they didn't do anything until they were attacked much, much later. Another treaty which I want to mention here is the treaty between Germany and the Soviet Union. Also in August, 2 days later, as a matter of fact, signed this pact of non-aggression, known in history as Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Molotov and Ribbentrop were both ministers of the Soviet Union and Germany, respectively. So that was the pact which clearly tells us that they were very friendly with each other, and they were very friendly with each other till 1941 in June, when the Soviet Union was attacked by Germany. But until then, they were collaborating, they had selling each other goods. And that pact of non-aggression also had a secret clause in which these two countries were already dividing Poland between themselves. Parts of Poland was supposed to go to Germany, parts to the Soviet Union. So as I said already, the attack of Poland happened on September 1st, 1939. It was really a massive attack. Poland very heroically and bravely defended itself for over a month. And while all of this was going on, the Polish troops were fighting Germans, on September 17th, out of the blue, the Soviets attacked Poland. They invaded Poland. They crossed the borders. And as I said, Polish government was completely unprepared for that. Polish government had not enough intelligence, or didn't believe this intelligence that indeed Soviets have this kind of plans. So they gave even some orders to military units not to fight, to just watch the Soviet troops. Despite these orders, some Polish units fought, some didn't. And one can say that partially due to this confusion, so many Polish officers were detained by the Soviets, and 22,000 of them were killed early next year in 1940 in what is known as the Katyn massacre. At the end of September, Poland is divided between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. So this map shows you how German forces are invading Poland from the north, from the west, and from the south, and the Soviets are crossing the border from the east. The campaign of September 1939 was so quick and so massive, the German attack was so massive, that in German, this kind of attack is known as a blitzkrieg, which means lightning war. First, have a look at these photos. They're very symbolic of what this disparity which there was. Superiority of German forces with 2,000 planes and 26,000 tanks, and Polish only 150 tanks and 400 planes. And Polish military still had cavalry at the time. But still, Polish forces were able to inflict a lot of casualties on Germans. There are a lot of monuments in Poland commemorating this heroism in Polish troops which fought during that time. There is one of them on the Baltic Sea. Just 180 Polish soldiers for a week defended their post, completely cut off from the Polish army. They knew they would not get any supplies, but still they thought that if they engaged these German troops, it would prevent further attacks along the Polish coast. And you can see a lot of different monuments like Hell Peninsula, some military installations still there. At the end of September, Poland was divided between two countries, but it was divided into three parts. One part which was directly incorporated into the Third Reich, or Nazi Germany, one part which was occupied by them, and the capital of that part was Kraków, although Warsaw was also part of it, and the part taken by the Soviet Union according to this Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. So this is the map. So you see on the left, this is the part incorporated into Germany, in the middle, occupied by Germany, on the right, so in the east, part taken by the Soviets. Please notice Auschwitz. Where is Auschwitz? In the territories which were incorporated by Germany, it's very south, close to Kraków. And Auschwitz, I think everybody knows Auschwitz-Birkenau, infamous concentration and death camp. Let us talk a little bit about what did life in Poland look like during the German occupation. First of all, I mentioned already that label of racial enemy, subhuman, which was given to Poles. So as such, they shouldn't receive education. They should just all work which they could do would be this work of laborers. So universities were closed, high schools were closed. They were supposed to receive a very, very simple education. And in order to make them into such people, and obedient also, obedient and subservient to Germans, Germans wanted to eliminate potential leadership of Poland. People like intellectual, the clergy, the landowners, they were arrested, they were put into camps. Some of them were killed immediately. And for instance, professors of Jagiellonian University, they were on November 6, 1939, they were told, please come to university. They thought it would be a new academic year. Surprise, there was German military, they were packed on trucks and taken to different camps, including Sachsenhausen camp. Some of them survived. I happen to know one of them as a child, but a lot of them didn't survive. So closing of universities, high schools, there was a curfew imposed on people, food was rationed, and the biggest rations were, of course, given to ethnic Germans. Then non-Germans, Jews got very little or close to nothing. The farmers were supposed to provide quotas of food to Germans. Everybody had to work. If they didn't, they were forcefully taken to Germany to work. And approximately, and you read it in your readings, 2 million people were taken to Germany over the course of the war. You were not supposed to have a radio, and every infraction was punishable by concentration camp or death. And in addition to that, German purposefully inflicted terror by randomly rounding up people and arresting them, sending them to camps, killing them. As you see in the red at the bottom, the Polish underground partisan movement, military movement against Germans, meaning killing German soldiers when there was already the war between Germany and the Soviet Union. After June of 1941, there were a lot of trains going east. So Poles attacked these trains, but first of all attacked Germans, especially those who were the most sadistic. But it had an enormous price, and the price was paid by civilians. Because for one killed German, quite often Germans would kill even 50 Poles. So the underground partisan movement really had to think twice before they went ahead and executed one of these sadistic. Usually there was somebody who was really known for being very cruel and responsible for killing a lot of people. And the most important of these groups of partisans was Home Army, which was already established in 1939. Please read this note on your own and reflect on that. It tells you more about goals of what Germans thought, what kind of education is enough for the Poles, and how they are supposed to be honest, diligent, and well behaved, and understand the divine duty to obey Germans. Of course, Polish people, a lot of them did the opposite. This is the place where the professors were arrested. In the part occupied by the Soviets, Polish people were also treated as enemy, but as a class enemy, because pre-war Poland was capitalist state, so that clashed. There was this ideological clash between the Soviet Union, which was communist, egalitarian state, no classes, at least that's what they wanted to create. And here Poland with class system, with capitalism, with landowners, with people having factories and so on. So that was that ideological conflict. Poles were treated as class enemies, and especially these people who had land, wealthy people, bankers, and so on. And a lot of them were killed, but some of them, of course, if they survived, they tried to somehow work and even provide jobs for Polish people, so they're not deported, so they are provided for. And if you look at this data, you see that the Soviets actually were more effective as far as deporting people than the Germans were, because they deported 1.5 million people to Siberia when they were, for instance, logging trees, worked in mines, and the southern parts of the Soviet Union. So in that time, and you see it's pretty short time, they deported such a massive number of people. And people which they considered suspicious were even people and subject to deportation were even knowing Esperanto, philatelists, and people who traveled abroad. And if you don't know what Esperanto is or who are philatelists, please check. Deportees were sentenced to hard labor or to penal exile. A lot of monuments to these people who suffered so much from the Soviets. These people were not remembered. I mean, they were remembered, but by people, but not by history during the time of communism. It was completely wiped out. It didn't exist in the history book. It existed in people's memory, but only after the fall of communism, monuments like this were erected. There is another similar monument in Warsaw. This symbol, which is letter P, and at the bottom it has this W, or W, which is the first letter of the word wolność, which is freedom, but also it looks like an anchor, and an anchor is a symbol of hope. Why anchor is the symbol of hope? Just imagine yourself being at sea on a boat. Let's say that there is a storm, and how would you make your boat stable? By putting the anchor in. So there how anchor is a symbol of hope. You know quite a lot about the uprising. You saw a very good film which shows it lasted for 63 days. A lot of heroism, a lot of bravery, but also huge tragedy. So many people died, maybe even 200,000 of civilians and about 20,000 of insurgents. A lot of places in Warsaw commemorating the uprising. That's what Warsaw looked like when it was liberated by the Soviets in 1945. Warsaw was bombed twice. First time in the September of 1939 during the September campaign, and then during the Warsaw uprising. It was rebuilt. It was the matter of national pride to rebuild Warsaw. I remember last scene in the film City 44 and that image of Warsaw, sort of like Phoenix becoming the city again. But not the entire town was rebuilt the way it looked before the war, because what we saw here, buildings which were from 16th, 17th century, when they were in ruin, after the war they were built to look exactly like this building looked in 17th, 18th century. But not all what was in ruin was rebuilt in the same way. For instance, here we have that very important Warsaw building, which was a gift, unwelcome gift from the people of the Soviet Union. The Warsawians actually much preferred some housing apartments, but the Soviets wanted to give them this. A lot of people don't like this building, but it is, if you visit it, it's a very interesting building, and it's part of Polish history. More monument, there's a lot of them. This monument, unknown soldier, usually when foreign delegations, foreign officials come to Warsaw, they go there, they lay wreath there. Let's talk a little bit about citizens of Poland who died during the Second World War. 1/5 of the population died, about 6 million of Polish citizens. And if you look here at the slide, about half of them were Polish Jews, about half of them were non-Jewish Poles. How Polish Jews died, we'll be talking more about these death camps and concentration camps where vast majority of them died. Here in this slide, I would like to draw your attention to the ways in which the Poles did die. So we have in military actions such as September campaign, in underground military actions of Home Army, mass executions, and we have the example of Palmyra Forest, which is near Warsaw, where on and on Nazi Germans would take Polish municipal workers, politicians, even athletes, and one famous athlete with Olympic medal were shot there. And that was again this attempt to eliminate any kind of leadership. Our Poles also died in random roundups, and I already mentioned this terror, inflicted terror in people, shot in the streets, in the camps. Also during rural pacifications, and I need to explain what were these pacifications. I mentioned that in Poland had that very active military underground. Well, they need support, they need food, they need shelter. Who would give it to them? Usually it's villages. So if Germans found out that a village is supporting these insurgents, then they would come, they would round up the village, kill people, and set the village ablaze. And that was called a pacification. And at least 300 of those were done in Poland. Also, a lot of slave laborers who were taken to Germany. Some of them had pretty good living conditions, but some did not. Like, for instance, my aunt on my father's side, who was not even 16. And she worked in the field, she worked the farm, very harsh environment. A lot of people who were deported by the Soviets, some of them died on the train. I had a friend, she died last year, but she was taken to Kazakhstan. Her family was taken. Her father was a forester. Her mother died on the train because she contracted a disease. And I already mentioned Soviets killing Polish prisoners of war in Katyn Forest and surrounding villages. About 22,000 people were killed there. Also, about 100,000 people were killed by Ukrainian nationalists who were doing ethnic cleansing, who believed that Hitler will give them their own country. Please look at the slide on your own. It's about how many people were really killed in Katyn. We already know that there were indeed two uprisings in Warsaw during the Second World War. One was a Jewish uprising in the ghetto in the spring of 1943. You have some numbers here. Jewish fighters just hoped, because they knew that people from the ghetto, which are sent away on the trains, and they're told they're going to be resettled, nobody ever hears from them. So it was obvious that they are taken somewhere and killed. So they started that uprising. Uprising was unsuccessful. A lot of people died. A lot of people were taken out of the ghetto. A lot of them to death camp at Treblinka. And the Warsaw Uprising, unsuccessful uprising, you know quite a lot about this uprising from the film. Data, how many people died, a lot of civilians died. At the end of the uprising, 700,000 remaining citizens of Warsaw were ordered to leave the city, and they left the city. 93% of the buildings in Warsaw were destroyed, and it was done on Hitler's order, who was quite infuriated by this uprising in Warsaw, and so he ordered the city to be razed without a trace. And of course, people of Poland, even more so, needed to rebuild the city. A lot of monuments, especially where the ghetto was, you can see this monument commemorating that was the ghetto. So there is a monument to the ghetto insurgents. There are two sides of this monument. In 2005, there was this beautiful museum of the history of the Polish Jews built just across from this monument. Beautiful piece of architecture and really comprehensive, great museum, praised for its collections and for the way of delivering information. Another monument connected with ghetto, Umschlagplatz, that was a square from which people were deported to death camps like Treblinka. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about Dr. Janusz Korczak later. The monument to the Warsaw Uprising, you see this P with the anchor. And I told you about what it symbolizes. This is more of that monument. Here you have the insurgents going into the sewer, and you remember that from the film. Every corner in the old part of Warsaw, you can see this kind of plaques commemorating people, listing people who died in the uprising. So this is a piece of that little mine tank called Goliath, which was a cable control mine tank. You remember when it exploded in the film and what it looked like. So you can see a piece of it in the wall of the cathedral in downtown Warsaw. A lot of children took part in the uprising. You remember them. They were very often messengers. And the monument to the insurgents in the form of Warsaw Uprising Museum was opened in 2004. Very interesting museum. Definitely recommend to you.